Okay, so now we have the next part. So we'll call this the post-rut. And this kind of whole period, depending on, like here in Illinois, I believe the 17th is opening day of shotgun season. So like the party is kind of over with all the influx of pressure. And then Indiana, I think their gun season or rifle season is probably around that same time period. Ohio, you guys still have true post-rut archery bow hunting.
We have the youth season that pops in. We have the
Okay.
youth season that pops in for 2 or 3 days, but for the most part, yes.
Okay. And so this is very dependent on that in my mind, and this is just my experience. If you can find an area that didn't have a lot of gun pressure, then I think some of these core principles will apply for sure. And so, but if you're in an area where there's really high gun pressure, you might have to relocate and try to go find an area that there wasn't a lot of gun pressure. So here's what John Eberhart. We love John. He's been on the podcast a bunch. He is, once again, there's a million ways to kill big deer, and he has his way. And whether you believe everything, I'll just say it how it is, and I would say this to John too. It's like he believes in scent lock. Okay, that's excellent. He has an incredible track record. But even if you're not believing that, like, look at his strategy. Like, he's still getting in bow range of these deer in a very specific fashion. And here's what he has to say about hunting. We'll call it the post-rut. And here's what he has to say.
So one thing that I picked up on from a previous conversation with you was that when you're hunting out of state, a lot of times you're running cameras on primary scrape areas. And also, when you're going to hunt those times, it's usually later in the year. Like in Kansas this year, you're going November 16th.
Right. Thanksgiving is when it gets good.
So when usually everyone talks about scrapes, they're talking October 22nd to the 1st of November. Mm-hmm. When do you see those scrapes start to turn back on, and why do you think that is?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I've got a really good answer for you. Because pre-rut, there's a pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut. Once the peak rut gets there, most of your big bucks, even out there, even when we're in Kansas, I'm talking the 150s and bigger, they're doed up. You hardly ever see them. They push does into bedding areas, and they don't come out during the daytime. So you'll see 125, 30, maybe a 140 incher, but you're not seeing the big ones. So once it gets about the 23rd, 24th, it's almost to the day, 23rd, 24th of November, that's when you start seeing those big bucks, because now the majority of the does in the area are bred, and now he has to go out just like he did during pre-rut. He has to go out post-rut. His testosterone is still high. He has to go out and physically search now for those late estrus does. So they're not as frequent as they are during the peak rut. And during peak rut, once he finishes one cycle, he can just go take over the next one. Even if she's with another buck, the dominant one will take her over and push her into a bedding area breeder. So post-rut is every bit as good as the pre-rut. I think it's actually a little bit better because they're a little bit more worn down. Their eyes are drawn. They just come through with reckless abandon, like I was mentioning with that 180 incher we talked about. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think after the 23rd or 24th in the Midwest, post-rut, if you're hunting in a state where the gun season doesn't open until December, I think that post-rut is absolutely the best time to kill a big buck.
I think John's an outstanding individual. I talk to him on a semi-regular basis. And I think the problem that people have with John is they can't get past, at times he can come off cocky. That's not John. Like, he
not
is
at all.
Not that guy at all. But people have a hard time getting past his set control regimen. But like, John is a freaking outstanding deer hunter. There's a lot of guys that follow his regimen that don't kill the deer that John kills. And like, whether you're with the scent thing or not, like, to your point that you said prior to the clip, listen to how he's breaking down the areas and his strategy around the way that he's hunting, regardless if you're a believer or not in the suit or the scent control stuff. Like, he's still doing a whole lot of stuff right.
Yeah. Simply put. So, we have a lot of clips to pull from Steve because we have a specific podcast that was released earlier this month on hunting basically the entire month of November. And so here's what he has to say. If you still have that tag in your pocket and you're still trying to chase down a buck, this is boiling it down to the most basic level. This is how he's going to do it. It's November 15th.
Okay.
You still haven't filled your tag.
Right.
Should you be nervous?
For me, I would say no, because you're getting into some of the days that I like the very best. 15th, that time's pretty good, but we get, you get around that 18th, 19th, right up until about Thanksgiving, those are really good days.
Yeah.
And 90% of the opportunities we get at that time are in the evenings on food sources. And it's like those more mature bucks, as a number of does that haven't been bred whittles down, they're coming to that as much for food as they are to keep checking new does. And we had a really amazing night. It's been years ago. I think it was 2010 or something, but we only had a couple guys hunting. They were people we'd told to come back because they'd had tougher hunts in the main part of the rut. So they were here in that, I think it was the 18th or 19th or sometime right around there. And we were also hunting for ourselves, and I shot the 198. One of the other hunters shot a 176 and a 167. So there's 5 guys out that night, and we shot we got all 3 of them.
Yeah.
That was the amazing thing.
Yeah.
You know.
What was the food source you guys were on then?
I was on a corn food plot. One guy was on and 2 of the other guys were on brassica plots.
Really?
Yep. And geographically, we were in 2 separate counties, but probably from north to south, we're probably 50 miles apart.
Oh, wow. So not even the same neighborhood.
We weren't even in the same neighborhood or same thing, but it was like your perfect day where, in the morning it was 55 degrees, and by 7 o'clock that night it was 22.
Ooh, yeah.
So it was a high pressure cold front. It was the classic day.
Yeah.
So
What's your personal favorite late November food source if you had to pin one?
I would say grains.
So even more linear, corn or beans.
Corn.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, corn. And I'll be honest, like I have always gotten my butt kicked in this time frame. I've never ever found success. And I think for me personally, a lot of times it's like almost recovery mode. Like,
sure. Well, okay, we run a e-commerce brand, a product company. Guess what is during this period? It's a little thing called Black Friday. You may have heard of it. You may have heard of it.
Oh man, yeah. It's for me, it's like, okay, let's focus back on the business, get things taken care of, because you trying to play catch up maybe for the last couple of weeks, and yeah, it's just kind of a recalibrate time for me personally. It's just the way it's always been.
Yeah, I fall into the same thing. A lot of the stuff I pushed off on everything is like, okay, I have to come back to reality, unfortunately or fortunately. But depending on, right during this period, it's Thanksgiving, maybe you get some time off and maybe you still have a buck tag in your pocket. There's a lot of guys that have really good success. And I think this clip from Don's going to illustrate that specifically. What about when you're hunting almost every day in the month of November on some of those, we're bound to at least get one really warm spell in November at some point.
Uh-huh.
Are those kind of throwaway hunts for you, or are those observation, or are you still?
It just depends on what stands I've got available and where my target buck is. Sometimes that's a good day to sleep in, catch up on your rest, and save yourself for those days when everything's right instead of getting burnt out. I think there's a lot of deer hunters that get burned out before the rut's over. The end of the rut, Thanksgiving weekend, is a fantastic time to kill a giant, but most bow hunters are burned out before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of play the long game again, and don't burn yourself out. If the weather's hot, stay home, sleep in that day, and save yourself for later in the month.
Mm-hmm. What makes that Thanksgiving time frame so special for killing a giant?
Well, this tip came from Roger Rothar too. When I was maybe 19, 20 years old, he talked about how great Thanksgiving weekend was, and if you think about the rut during the middle 2 weeks of November, there's hot does available to a buck almost constantly. He gets done with one hot doe, it doesn't take him very long at all until he finds the next one. But as you start winding down towards the end of November, those hot does are harder to come by. So a buck is spending more time between hot does on the search. And around Thanksgiving, he may spend 2 days searching between hot does. And when he's on his feet a lot. He knows it's about over for the year, and he's desperately searching for that last hot doe. And there was a period about 20 years ago, maybe 25, where for 5 consecutive seasons, the best buck I seen from a tree stand, each of those 5 seasons, was during Thanksgiving weekend.
What do you think about that Thanksgiving time frame? Because like I said, we're all hunting whitetails, and the whitetail does not evolve as fast as our tactics do on on what we say changes. Like, they've been evolving for however many thousands of years, and then we're, every year like, well, this is what worked this year. And but anyways, it's like I said, this Thanksgiving time frame I think is continuing to gain popularity for guys that still have their tags in their pocket as those bucks become desperate.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is just if you just pounded your farm for the last 30 days, naturally run a lot of cameras in those neighborhoods where it has been hunted really hard. I just haven't seen that. But there's areas and friends that I know that are in different pockets, and it's an excellent time frame. So I think that's the key takeaway of finding a pocket that hasn't just been hunted really hard for the last 20 days, 25 days, or 30 days.
I'll say, when I was like strictly the big woods guy, that handful of years where we were hunting hill country, big wood style stuff, this time frame is where we would see more new bucks show up in the daylight than any other time of the year. Just so like, I'm not going to say it was a random buck, but a buck that maybe we had maybe 1 or 2 pictures of throughout the year and then like completely gone. This is the time where we would find them on a scrape, or we'd find them in some type of travel corridor or pinch point. But again, never had success catching up with them because it was, I'm going to say 90% of the time, whether it was camera placement or whatever the case was, you got 1 or 2 pictures of him. So
It's
it
tough.
is what it is.